morning, all. Thank you for joining today's webinar. We're going to give a few more minutes here as folks are starting to continue to join in. So we'll give a second for the audience here to join through. By way of introduction, my name is Tyler Suss, the Director of Alliances and Marketing for Neudesic's Data and AI practice. Very excited for the conversations that we're going to have today around data governance. We've got a great group of speakers and subject matter experts in this space. So very excited for today's conversation. So once again, we'll give a few more minutes before we officially kick things off here. So thank you all for your patience. All right, so we're continuing to see some folks join in, but just for time purposes, going to kick off here. So once again, thank you all for joining the conversation today. Very excited for our discussion here and great group of speakers and subject matter experts in the data governance space today. Again, my name is Tyler Suss. I'm the Director of Alliances and Marketing here at Neudesic. So I'll be your MC today. Just for some housekeeping items, right? So as we go through the content today, if you have questions, please input them into the chat on the bottom right of your screen. You should see a questions and chat box, so you can pop that open at any point and input questions. We will be addressing them both in the chat and then at the end of the discussion today as well. So please don't hesitate to put in the chat at any time during today's session. So in kind of preparation for kickoff here, why data governance? So we're seeing quite a rapid shift from digital transformational initiatives to making data more discoverable across the organization, making that data available to users of the business, but also making that in a more secure and compliant way. And to do that, really, organizations are required to both collect, integrate, analyze, and govern all of those data assets, which is becoming increasingly difficult right across really a hybrid data landscape at scale. And until now, it has been a very manual and siloed task and really requiring an extensive tool set. So in today's discussion, we're going to go through really more of a modern portfolio approach that can help with the complexity of data governance, really help reduce that time-consuming and error-prone work that has historically been a part of a data governance strategy. So very excited for today. Kicking off here. So once again, our speakers today, very excited for our guest speakers joining the conversation. So Michelle Shaw, Data and AI Specialist Director from Microsoft, Malcolm Hawker, Head of Data Strategy, and then Neudesic's own Pedro Franco and Jonathan Bloom. We've got some really good sessions today planned from both a strategy perspective as well as our keynotes. We're going to be looking at common mistakes to avoid throughout your data governance strategy as well, sharing actionable insights that we've uncovered from recent projects and best practices. And then we're also going to take some time to jump into Azure Purview and look at an in-depth demo of our Data Accelerator and Data Governance Accelerators. And then we'll finish off with a Q&A. But once again, encourage all that maybe just joining the last few minutes to input any questions that you have into the chat. We'll be addressing them both during the session and of course at the end for Q&A. So with that being said, I know we've got a ton of content to get to, so we are going to kick it off. And Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to you to lead us through the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tyler, and welcome everyone to our session today. As you all know, data is exploding and it's being created, stored, and shared everywhere. In fact, the IDC estimates that in 2025, the world will create and replicate over 175 zettabytes of data. That's representing a 10-fold increase from the amount of data created just in 2016. And when you take a step back, data is really your most important architectural consideration. We are moving to a world where every app will be intelligent and adapt in real time. Analytics will not just be a back-end process, it will become a critical part of the product experience. And not only is the amount of data growing, but the types of data continue to evolve, such as video files, images, IoT, and even sensor data. And of course, along with that comes an increase in the number of regulations that we must comply with. We also need to be able to govern the data, no matter where it is stored, whether it's at the edge in a data center or in various types of databases, or even across multiple clouds. And it's no wonder that many organizations are struggling with how to manage this data overload, which is why we've deeply integrated all of our data services with Microsoft Purview, enforcing governance across all of these data assets wherever they may reside. We believe that the new way to optimize your data strategy is to deliver a unified view of data in the organization, which means across hybrid, across multi-cloud environments, by bringing them all together. And not only that, but we've got to bring together the business users of data with the protectors of data. And today, together, Microsoft, Prophecy, and Neudesic, we are well equipped to help you across the 4 key elements that you see on the screen today. These are so crucial to a successful data governance strategy. And with that, I'll hand it over to Malcolm from Prophecy to take us from here.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. First off, a little bit of a disclaimer and an apology. If you hear me cough during my presentation, please forgive me. I'm getting over a significant illness. Let's move forward. I'm going to talk this morning about the critical role that MDM will play in the modern data estate. If you are aiming for a compliance goal, or if you are aiming for digital transformation, or if you are aiming for more tactical things like maybe consolidating ERP instances, some of the things that were mentioned on previous slides will require a focus on MDM. You saw in a previous slide about the importance of breaking organizational data silos. We would argue that MDM is a critical component of that. What you're hearing me say is that MDM and governance go hand in hand. You really can't have one without the other, because not all data is created equally. There are some data elements that need consistent naming and structure and quality and business rules. And that's where MDM really comes into play. And that's where Prophecy comes into play. Let's move forward. And again, why MDM? Well, what we've seen over the last few years is that MDM has significantly transitioned from a nice to have, we'll get to that when we get to it, type approach, to a must have approach. So you're looking at a quote on the screen here from Gartner. Prior to joining Prophecy as their head of data strategy, I was a Gartner MDM analyst. As a matter of fact, chances are pretty good I actually wrote what you see on the screen. I'll take it even one step further. I had written in a Gartner analyst note last year called The State of MDM, where I had said that MDM has transitioned from a nice to have to a must have. If organizations are serious about digital transformation, if they're serious about operating in a compliant way, if they're serious about ESG, if they are serious about breaking data silos, MDM is a mission critical component of that. This is what we really mean by the modern data estate. And there are more than just a catalog, and there's more than just MDM. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But MDM is most certainly a must-have and something that organizations need to be considering as they move towards this notion of a modern data estate. Let's move forward. But what we see is that if organizations are aiming for the strategic goals over on the right-hand side of the screen, if you are aiming for the strategic goal of a digital transformation or an ERP consolidation or of a single goal master record or a 360-degree view, whatever that you're trying to get to as an organization, what we consistently see is that organizations will hit what we are calling a Prophecy, the brick wall. If you could advance, Tyler. What they will hit in that brick wall is poor data quality. Right? You will see the same version of the same record appearing multiple times. If you have a compliance goal of KYC, of knowing your customer, how can you truly know your customer if you have 5 or 6 or 7 different versions of the exact same customer record, or maybe with just slight variations of the same record? Maybe you've got missing or incomplete data. Maybe you've got duplicated or conflicting data. This is what prophecy calls the brick wall, and we see this time and time and time again, is that companies have very, very lofty goals over on the right-hand side, but when they start to analyze the data, when they start to embark on these strategic initiatives, they hit the brick wall, they find these issues, and then they end up calling prophecy to say, hey, can you help? And the answer is, we most certainly can. This is where MDM comes into play. Let's move forward. We can break through the brick wall. So MDM is purpose-built to break data silos. That's what we do for a living. We can look across multiple sets of data, multiple sources of data, multiple structures, multiple quality rules, and come up with a single, trusted, consistent, accurate view of your data, of your master data. And we can do that in a way that is relatively easy, that is quick time to deploy, quick time to value, and can serve as the foundation for any modern data architecture. That includes a data mesh, that includes a data fabric, you name it. If you're trying to evolve to some of these more modern forms of data architectures, you are going to need MDM. Because again, do you really want to carry forward a lot of that legacy data debt? Do you want to carry forward multiple versions of the same customer record? Probably you don't. Let's move forward. Let's build again, Tyler. Thank you. Here's some examples of customers, of prophecies who have solved for these issues and some of the areas that they're focused on. So prophecy is what is called a multi-domain MDM solution. We can work across multiple business objects, customers, products, locations, assets, you name it. Here are some very, very well-known consumer-facing brands that have leveraged the prophecy solution to overcome their own version of that brick wall that we were seeing before. But really, this is all about scale, right? This is about having trustworthy and consistent data. This is about having the right data to move forward to hit those business objectives that we were talking about before. So often companies will hit this brick wall and they will figure out, okay, well, we need MDM. Well, let's roll up our sleeves and let's get this done. But there's a few key things that we need to think about as we embark on an MDM strategy. I'm really going to focus on one of those things. I would welcome everybody listening to connect with me on LinkedIn. We'll have a question and answer session a little bit later on in this session if we want to go a little bit deeper. I'll focus on the one key area where organizations really struggle when it comes to implementing MDM. There are others. There are a lot of areas where you could potentially struggle with MDM, but we'll focus on one. So if we could move forward. Lastly, though, again, touching on this notion of a modern data estate. Yes, data governance solutions like Purview, amazing, really critical. You need a foundation of a solid data catalog, right? You need the things over on the left-hand side, but you also need the things over on the right-hand side. You need an MDM solution to provide for flexible and extensible data models. You need MDM solutions to allow you for configurable business rules when it comes to your data quality, for configurable business rules around things like a definition of a customer or a product or a location. You need workflow management. You need easy to use UIs to allow data stewards to manage this data, increasingly within the business units themselves. There's a build here, Tyler. Let's move forward. So whether you're looking at this from more of a strategic perspective on the top of the model here, or whether you're looking at a more of a tactical perspective, these pieces all fit together to start enabling this notion of a more modern data estate. Prophecy plays on the right-hand side of the screen there. We can move forward. That's great. So let's dive into some of the common mistakes around MDM. Again, I'll really focus on the biggest one and how to avoid it, but as I mentioned before, would welcome offline conversations to go into more detail into some of the others. Let's move forward. 85% of conventionally justified MDM programs are going to fail, right? They're going to fail because some of the assumptions that were made to fund them were logical, were correct, were completely sensical, but have a fatal flaw. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But what we see over and over and over again is IT leaders focusing on MDM and focusing on really some of the wrong goals here, right? Let's move forward. So there are a couple of key things to be aware of here. So number one, the number one reason for MDM failure, and I've been in this space for almost 30 years now, I can't tell you how often I talk to people who have some significant battle scars when it comes to MDM. They say, oh, well, we've tried that before, it didn't work. I get it, because I've been there. The first 4 times I tried to do MDM, there were dismal failures. And my failures were tied to the #1 driver of MDM failure, and that is the lack of a compelling business case, the lack of a quantifiable connection between investments in MDM, specifically around MDM software and the services needed to implement it, and quantifiable connection between those investments and the delivery of actual quantifiable business outcomes, right? And what we mean by business outcomes are things that the business cares about. One of the hardest lessons that I ever learned as a data and analytics leader was that the business really doesn't care that much about data quality. So when we focus on data quality as a business outcome, it's a bit of a mistaken approach here. It's not a great focus. We would argue that the focus should really be more on business outcomes. If you don't have a business case for MDM, what can happen to the 2 things on the left-hand side? One is that the business does not ratify what you're working on, meaning they don't agree to what we're investing in. The business does not say, I have a stake in the success of this program. That can lead to program failure, or simply the wheels just falling off, right? The business not getting behind the program, not being a business case, a lot of money flying out the door. A new CIO comes in and says, why are we spending all this money on MDM? The program lead can't justify it, and the program stops. We see these things all of the time, but Prophecy can most certainly help. We have people who can help you work on a business case. It's something we do as a matter of course with all of our implementations, and I can certainly help as well. Again, happy to help offline on how you would overcome some of these challenges related to building a business case. Let's move forward. Here are some of the usual suspects of a dysfunctional business case. When I was a Gartner analyst, the first question that I would ask is, why are you doing MDM, right? And almost always the first answer that I would get is, well, we want to improve our data. That's not a business outcome. Better data is not necessarily a business outcome. A business outcome is to be operationally compliant, right? A business outcome is to reduce your business risk through operations by being more compliant, right? Or to drive new sales, or to reduce the cost of inventories. The list of potential business outcomes here is very, very long, but these are some examples. You keep going, Tyler. There's some of the examples here of some of the what we would often hear as, you know, this is a business case. We think a 360-degree view is a business case. Well, until you can put an actual number on it, you really don't have a business case, right? So you absolutely positively need to be able to put a hard and fast number on what you expect to drive from a risk reduction perspective, a revenue increase perspective, or an operational savings perspective when it comes to investments in MDM. Let's move forward. Here's some ideas of how you can actually recognize a real business case, right? And I mentioned some of these already. We're going to increase our customer onboarding. We're going to increase our cross-sell or our upsell, or we're going to reduce our operating risk, or we are going to reduce our inventory levels. Again, the list of potential options here is very, very long. The good news is your business partners will already have these KPIs. They will already have them. They're probably what are used to calculate their annual incentives, their annual bonuses. So it's finding those KPIs that your business leaders care about the most and focusing your MDM program on those KPIs. If you can tie your MDM program to business KPIs that your leaders, that your stakeholders really, really care about, you're going to be in a great place to succeed. Let's move forward. One more. So there's a couple of different ways that you can approach MDM. There are operational approaches to MDM. There are analytical approaches to MDM. A great starting point is more of an analytical approach. This does kind of align more to a 360 type view where you're just simply trying to answer a question from more of a reporting perspective. How many customers do we have? How many product SKUs do we have? And on and on. This does kind of align to the notion of a maturity kind of model here, where you can start simple at lower levels of maturity from a governance perspective and advance over time. Operational MDM, generally this is what most people think about when they think MDM, which is creating a gold master record and then using that gold master record operationally within your CRM systems, your ERP systems, and on and on. Operational MDMs hold the most value, but they're also the most complex. They're also the most risky. So let's move forward on the next slide. And we can look at this kind of through the lens of a 2x2 here. We're starting in the bottom left. The results here can often be slightly less, but less risky and less benefit necessarily for the business, but can still drive some significant benefits for the business. But over time, where potentially you could migrate to more of those operational forms. So what we're kind of starting to get into here is, can you start simple, right? Can you take a little bit more of an MVP type approach, more of an agile approach to MDM? Yes, you absolutely can. Can you start with some simple, maybe analytical use cases, and then slowly build your maturity over time to get to some of those operational use cases I was just talking about? Yes, you absolutely can. So this business case is not a one and done. This is something that will evolve slowly over time through the life of an MDM program. We're starting simple is usually the best approach. Let's move forward. Here are a few ideas that you can take with you. I'm not going to go into much detail here in terms of like, okay, we want to move forward. What do we do? Would welcome additional conversations either in this session or offline through LinkedIn or offline, just connecting with me at Prophecy. But I'm really excited to have the chance to talk with everybody today and to share these insights. And let's move forward to the last slide. And thank you so much for your time today, guys. I hope you can understand and see kind of the key connection between MDM and data governance software, particularly Purview. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. Good morning, everyone. My name is Pedro Franco. I'm the Director of Data and AI for the East region of Neudesic. I've been a data professional for 15 years. And during those 15 years, I had the opportunity not only to work in different capacities within data organization, from database developer to business intelligence and ETL developer, database administrator and data architect, but also lead an entire organization, data estates. And I think it's a very exciting time to be in the world of data, because we have all these tools that truly enable us to build a governed data estate. A couple of concepts that I want to touch on today as we continue this conversation on Purview as well as Prophecy are key components of a data governance strategy, and those are metadata management, and those are the definitions, models, data flow, and other information critical to understanding the data and the systems through which it's created, maintained, and accessed. Purview, can we go to the next slide, Tyler, please? Purview enable all those capabilities and more, but at the core of it all, you need to have a solid metadata management strategy in order to really start getting a hold of the true value of your data and to really have a chance at succeeding in a digital transformation effort. Purview offers data cataloging capabilities, not only from within the Azure, but other clouds, on-prem, and SaaS solutions. It offers data classification. It identifies the type of data that you're interacting with. You can actually label your information for PI, PCI, HIPAA, GDPR, and much more than just that. You can actually load a business glossary, and the business glossary is very important because as you start exploring your metadata across the organization, you will see that there are many systems that call the exact same data point in a different way. So the data glossary would allow you to do is assign a business term to it, so the entire organization is speaking the same language. And ultimately, it tracks the data lineage, which maps the flow of data end to end through the assets that you are actually loading within your catalog or within your data map. The greatest thing is using the right tools, using the appropriate set of technologies. All this process is automated, and Purview offers tremendous capabilities around data discovery and searchability, usability, tracking where your data comes from, where it's going, and who is using it. And it also allows to have significantly more visibility into the security of it all. You can actually create policy management to grant access to users to a particular data set, whether it lives in ADLS or it lives in SQL Server. The other very important component of a governance strategy is reference and master data management. And these are the co-critical shared data to enable consistent use across systems of the most accurate, timely, and relevant version of the truth about essential business entities. I cannot emphasize how important is it to have a master data management strategy with the new modern architectures that we're seeing. As Malcolm shared a minute ago, whether clients are going with data fabric or data mesh, it's extremely important to have a very well established master data management strategy in place. And the reason for that is because master data management, by consolidating all your core critical assets into a one version of the truth, it enables data integration and interoperability. So if you are deciding to go with a data mesh approach and you want to make sure that everybody's speaking the same language, if everybody comes to get master data from the same location, you don't have to struggle trying to merge this particular ID from one part of the mesh to the other, because everybody has the same master ID. That's one of the key importance of master data management. And it also enforces quality. So while Purview is defining the policies, Prophecy is actually enforcing those quality rules. And that's why these two tools together make a very powerful solution for anyone trying to be on the winning side of digital transformation. And we move to the next slide, please, Tyler. Another great piece between this partnership of Azure Purview and Prophecy Master Data Management is that they connect seamlessly. It's just a toggle button. It's just going into the configuration panel of Prophecy and enabling access to Purview. And then the metadata is published to the Purview catalog, and Prophecy can bring glossary terms from Purview. So it's the best way to have both the best of both worlds, metadata management and master data management in one solution. Can you go to the next slide? We have actually tried with some of our clients here at Neudesic implementing all these two solutions, metadata and master data management. The first example that I'm going to share with you today was in the financial services firm. They were starting their digital transformation effort. They were migrating most of their PI and PHI information to the cloud, but they were not very sure that their data will be properly secure on the cloud. What we did for them was implement Synapse and Purview, and the use case that they wanted to do is how can I make sure that automatically I can move my information from on-premise to the cloud, making sure that it's always in a secure container. So using the Purview APIs, we catalog all their information on-prem, and we apply classifications for PI and PHI into every data sets that we were planning to bring. And then the pipelines will gather this information, these sensitivity labels from Purview, and based on the sensitivity label, they will write it to a PI or non-PI container. The result of this effort was an organization that was much more confident that the data will be secure on the cloud without them having to do it all manually. So it was like a perfect example of how Purview and Synapse come together. Can we move to the next slide, Tyler? The next example, it was in the transport and logistic industry. And this is one of my favorites because they, similar to the financial services company, they were trying to start their digital transformation effort going to the cloud. They were processing millions of messages from all their assets moving through North America. And most of these messages relied heavily on master data management, yet there wasn't a master data management solution in place. The data resided in multiple places or just within the transactional system that they wanted to do. Furthermore, the data wasn't updated near real time. It was updated once a month, and there wasn't really like a strong stewardship over it. So that's when we decided to implement Prophecy in combination with Purview and Synapse. And the result was bringing vast information of master data into one centralized location. And we were able to put every system in the same place. Everybody had the exact same view of the master data that they were trying to capture. They are still going through their digital transformation effort, but just the implementation of master data management as well as metadata management have them in a much better place to ensure that quality and interoperability is going to be sustained as they continue to move their systems to the cloud. And now I will turn it over to my colleague, Jonathan Bloom, who is gonna tell you a little bit more about Neudesic accelerators, as well as a demo, which is, I think, what everybody came here to see today. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Pedro, for that excellent presentation on Purview in Prophecy. Just going to share my screen here real quick. Okay, yes, so thank you. My name is Jonathan Bloom. I'm a principal consultant here at Neudesic, and I'm thrilled to present today on our new Accelerator offerings. So let's go ahead and get started. So basically, as you know, Purview's been out for a while. We actually have a jump start to get you up and running within 3 weeks. We also are working on a Prophecy Accelerator to get you up to speed as well. So those are ready to go. And then we also have a third one, which combines the Purview and the Prophecy, along with our Data Platform Accelerator, which has been out for quite a while now. So I feel pretty good about having this offering. I'm not sure if any other companies have this offering, but basically it's pretty solid. So we'll go into some of the details. So we see a lot of customers nowadays that are trying to become data driven. That means that they treat the data as an asset. So an asset has a positive influence on your by increasing sales or reducing costs or streamlining processes. But if data quality is not there, or if data is used incorrectly, it's actually a liability. It could be breached, it could be inaccurate reporting. So we're seeing a problem statement with a lot of customers out there in need of some data governance, a framework to wrap around their assets so that they can become data driven. And that's why here at Neudesic, we're leveraging the data governance experience and our partnerships with Prophecy and Microsoft to get up to speed fast to help just about every customer that's treating data as an asset and wishes to begin their journey. So ideally, we have this pattern here. It's a framework that we use to, the underlying content is our Data Platform Accelerator, where we leverage the storage account here across the bottom. And this is within the storage account, we receive these files from either source files or databases or what have you. And then we land them in the landing. We use pipelines in Synapse or ADF to land it in the query zone as a Delta table. And the interesting thing is now we're able to flow it into the Prophecy. Prophecy is our MDM solution that we're partnering with. And once it resides in the Prophecy MDM, we have a tremendous amount of mechanisms to ensure that your data is quality by matching, merging, survivor, workflows, what have you. And we'll get into that in a minute. And then we flow it back to our enriched zone as a Delta table, and finally our sanction. So this is about done. We're ready to release it shortly. So it's kind of our soft launch. And then finally, it could be pushed into analytics or Power BI. It can also be leveraged throughout the organization by the machine learning and data scientists from the enriched or the sanction. So it's a pretty good offering. We're proud to present it today. So at this point, I'd like to go ahead and begin the demo. All right, with that said, I'd like to start with the Purview, Microsoft Purview. So here you can see that we have an instance of Purview up and running in our demo environment. From here, we can do a lot of things. We can browse our assets from collections or by source type. So what does that mean? Well, within Purview, we can register assets, and once those assets are registered, then we can scan them. We can apply classification rules to identify sensitive information, such as GDPR, PII, which is personal identifiable information, PCI for the credit card industry, HIPAA. So we have that classification in the background. We can schedule those scans. So here you can see we have a variety of data sources already created. We have ADLS2, we have the Azure SQL database, we have the Power BI, and we also have the Synapse. One thing to mention, as Pedro said earlier, the Purview and Prophecy integration is tight. So once you install the Prophecy, you automatically have direct back and forth communication so that you can scan your assets in real time. There's no real configuration required. It just picks up that information. So what are we looking at? Well, these are entities within the Prophecy. So you can drill into it and you can see a variety of things. The properties. In this case, there's no lineage. We could have contacts and we could have related objects, entities within the Prophecy. Next thing I want to talk about is the Data Glossary. So when we think of scanning the assets, so let's say you have a SQL Server on-prem, you set up your self-hosted integration runtime, you register the asset, you apply the scan, it goes out and crawls your on-premise database, and it returns a ton of metadata information, including table names, column types, descriptions. So those descriptions could be added at the database level, but then also, let's say you have a customer underscore 123, and the business doesn't necessarily know what that means. So we can wrap a glossary around it, and the glossary allows you to sort of come up with a definition, like an encyclopedia. So you would create like a customer definition here in the glossary terms, and then you could apply it to multiple fields in your purview. One way to do that is to you can upload a pre-built glossary using this mechanism here, and then you would simply point to your CSV file and apply the update, and then it would get ingested into your purview, and from there you can modify it, and then it would go through an approval process so somebody could approve it. So here you can see a sample of what a file would look like. So you can identify the name, the nickname, it's in draft status, the resource, you can apply synonyms. Another nice feature is you can add the stewards and the experts. So what that means is within the purview, let's say you have a self-service Power BI person out there that's looking for the customer. He gets the customer, but he has a question, so he wants to know how to reach out. So that's how they would do that. They would go there. So let's move on. So here you can see within Purview, we have a map view of some assets. What we have here is the root collection, and that means that it's the first collection and it's always named after your Purview instance. And then from there, you can create a collection, and a collection is simply like a folder within. If you're familiar with Windows file system, you can have nested files and folders and subfolders. So within our collection, we bundled everything together. So we establish a connection to the Power BI, to the SQL, to the Synapse, and to the ADLS2. So if we were to drill into one of these and say, let me see the details, you can see that we performed a scan, it completed success. One particular scan, it discovered 9 assets, and here you can see some more information. If you wanted to edit the source, you could do that. But essentially what I wanted to say is that we can scan your Power BI tenants and ingest that information, and it should show the lineage at some point during the scan. We mentioned the collections. It's basically a subfolder collection. You can distribute your collections accordingly based on your organization needs. You can put databases together, storage accounts together, or you could do on-prem, you could do cloud, what have you. So that's good. What we have under these classification rules is you can, out of the box, you have a series of predefined classification rules. And you may or may not need all these. So the recommendation is to not select the ones you're not using, or because there's a charge for that, but essentially you can create these custom ones. So here you can see we created a custom classification rule, and if you were to drill into it and go through the process, this WYSIWYG online editor, you can specify your data patterns. What that means is if it recognizes, as it's crawling the system and it identifies a column and the data has this type of pattern, it's going to flag it as this classification rule. And you could tie the rule to a classification, and there again, you can create your custom classifications. And then you can also set pattern rules. And then lastly, the scan set rules, you can create custom ones here. And essentially what this is doing is tying those classification rules to an actually scan set rule. So when the job runs, it's going to look for that and it's going to flag it accordingly. We mentioned the integration runtimes. You may have seen these with Synapse or Power BI, but essentially we run these on a VM typically, and it basically establishes a connection to your on-prem or alternative data sources. This is new Data Estate Insights, and essentially it gives you a high-level graphical representation. Unfortunately, it's red because it's a demo environment, but there's a lot of good information that the chief data officers and the security people can use to manage your data, because that's the reason we're using this purview, is to get a handle on your data ecosystem in one unified approach in cloud in Azure Purview, Microsoft Purview, so that you can manage your business and your data, and you can classify your objects so that you can lock them down and make sure the people have only the required access that they need to do their job. Here you can see the distribution of data and the different resources within Azure. So there's a lot of good reports out there. And then I'd like to go over to data policy. Now this is something new in preview, and essentially what it does, it allows you to create policies within your ADLS, your Azure SQL, and perhaps more resources down the road. But what does that mean? Well, you can create a policy and say this group of people, and you can attach it to an AD group, and say this set of people has access to these specific folders within the ADLS, and this group does not. So it's actually pretty cool, and you can create these rules here. It's in preview, but it's pretty cool feature because prior to this, we had to do all that manually. Another new feature that hasn't been released yet, it's in preview, is self-service. So if I'm a Power BI person and I need access to a specific data set, I can initiate a workflow and say, yes, I'd like this access, please, and somebody would grant your permission or deny, and then you would get that access. So it's all self-service. So Purview has its hooks into a lot of different technologies, so that's really good. Just some information here for the data factory. You can set your data factory one or more, and what it'll do is every time the pipeline runs, it'll create the lineage here in the Purview. So here's some more information on the workflows. Within the credentials, you can establish connections to your Key Vault secrets in case you don't want to store your information here within the Purview. But essentially, the only other thing I wanted to show here is that this is a CSV file that resides in the ADLS2, and you can see that the classifications were picked up when the scan ran, and it flagged this as an insurance policy number. So that would be useful for the security officer to go in there and lock down that particular column or file so that only certain people have access to that. And as the scan ran, it ingested this metadata, which represents the fields along with the field types as well as the classification. So that's some good information there. I'd like to switch over. Before I switch over, I just want to let you know that we do have the Azure Purview Data Governance 3-week POC, and the Prophecy one should be out there shortly. So that's good information there if you're interested in a quick get up to speed fast and have us introduce you to the Purview. The next thing I want to talk about is Prophecy. So Prophecy is our MDM partner that we use to make sure that our data is quality. So in order to stand up Prophecy within the Azure, we have a GitHub that we go to, and you can actually initiate the install through this ARM, which is how we did it, and then you can kick off the job here by deploying to Azure. Once it deploys, well, keep in mind that it's going to require a certain set of assets, and we have ARM templates already built for that. And you can see that one is the Key Vault, the Managed Identity, the Prophecy. We have an ARM template for that locally, the Purview, the storage account, and the Synapse. So we can stand that up rather quick to get your Prophecy up and running. Once it installs, keep in mind that it runs in Azure Kubernetes. So Azure Kubernetes is the front-end shell that hosts your web portal and a variety of back-end stuff, but it does connect to the Azure SQL database to store your data. So here you can see that when you do the install for Prophecy, it generates this database, and the database has tables, and those tables are tied to the Prophecy. So if we wanted to get a more in-depth look into the Prophecy, here you can see that we're in something called the Fast Apps Studio. And within the Fast Apps Studio, we can assign permissions and accounts and teams. So here we can add one or more individuals, and then you can assign permissions as well as roles. I will say that the granular level of security within this Prophecy application is pretty amazing because you can lock it down pretty good to the entity, to the attribute, and within the attribute you can apply a where clause. So let's say Fred, the data steward, is managing this entity. He only gets access to this entity in this column, and within this column, he can only look at, let's say if it was state, we could say Florida. So it is pretty granular. Likewise, we can set up teams, and the teams is basically a group, and you can add individuals to the group and apply permissions that way. So within the Prophecy, it all revolves around a model, and you think of a model as a database. And a database has tables, but in this case, it has entities. So within your entities, you have attributes. And those attributes, it always defaults out of the box. Every time you create a new entity, it's going to have a name and a code. And think of those as like a primary auto integer in SQL Server, where you can set it to incrementally, or you could define your own naming system. And then you can also add your own name. And then you could start adding your own attributes. And it has about 5 different field types that you can add. So what that means is when we think of master data management, we can combine multiple entities. And when we say entities, if you think back to the dimensional model, you would have dimensions and facts. And a facts is like an event. Something happened and we reference it back to the dimension tables. A dimension table is sort of like a noun. It's a person, place, or thing. So in MDM, we typically only store those dimensions, like a person, place, or thing. We can track the changes over time, and we have an audit trail to see who changed what when. And we can also apply these data quality rules. So if we had some data flowing in from wherever, and it tried to insert the record into the customer B2B, it has to apply the first data quality rule. This one is address. If it passes that one, it goes to the next one. If it passes that, so let's say it fails, well then a notification can be triggered to your data steward so that they can go in there and fix the record. So data quality is very important in the world of MDM. We also have matching and survivorship. So let's say we have customers from 7 different systems, Salesforce or Dynamics or what have you, and all those records are funneling into Prophecy. We can group them together based on common attributes and bundle them together. And not only that, we can identify the golden record and then collapse all the pertinent information, because this record may have email and this one doesn't. This one has a phone number, this one doesn't. So we can collapse it into a golden record. And what that allows you to do is throughout the organization, you're all reporting off the same master data, which is pretty important. It has the audit trail, because how many times have you been in the field and data's changing and nobody knows who or how or when? Well, now we have audit trail. We have rules that govern the data. Another nice thing is this Fast App Studio. What that is, it's like a web portal, so that you, if you chose to not have all the data stewards install this product, you can install it on the web. Well, basically, it's a drag and drop WYSIWYG where you don't have to have HTML experience. And when you do that, this is what it looks like. So this is like our demo environment. But if we were to click on this consumer, what it's doing is pulling from the Azure SQL database. And some of these have a red exclamation. That means that the record failed the data quality rule, most likely. So if we were to interrogate this and say, what seems to be the problem here? Well, the tax ID is required, and for some reason it wasn't inserted, wasn't present at the time of insertion. So what I'd like to do is do a quick update, and now I'm playing the role of the data steward, and I drop on down here to the tax ID, and I'll just enter. Pretty sure that's accurate. And then what happens is, once I apply that change, it's going back to the data quality rule, and it's saying, does that meet the criteria? And shortly enough, it should process, and then that red exclamation go away. So the data steward's role is to make sure that the data is of good quality. See, the red exclamation went away. And this is a really cool tool because there's so much you can do with this Prophecy web portal. It has built-in reports. It's just tremendous on how much functionality it has, and it's totally customizable. So with that said, we talked about the Purview, we talked about the Prophecy, and now we're going to talk about another feature that we have here at Neudesic. And close this real quick. We kind of integrate the Purview and the Prophecy into our Synapse. So what does that mean? Well, we've had a data platform accelerator for years, and it's a hot seller. And what it does, it's a framework to get you up to speed rather quickly by using backend tables to store your information. And then when the Synapse pipelines run, it reads from those tables and moves the data accordingly throughout the life cycle. I think we showed that earlier in our PowerPoint. But essentially, you can see we have the landing, the query, the enrich, and the sanction. Likewise, we have the landing, the query, the enrich, and the sanction. So in this case, if we were to drill into our landing, let's say that we had a job to push the data or pull the data into our storage account, ADLS2, we drop it into the non-PII folder, and then we're using a model called the Accord. Here you can see the source files. They're just simply CSV files. So what happens is the pipeline's going to go and pick up that file, and it's going to process it, and it's going to land it into the query zone, and it's going to convert it to a Delta table, right? There's no really business transformation, but essentially it's now a table in a Delta table. And from here, we can push it into Prophecy using a pipeline. We use a REST API, which is an out-of-the-box functionality within the Prophecy, and it pushes it into the MDM. And from there, we apply our data quality rules, our matching strategies. We can kick off workflows. We can do write backs to the source system. But at the end of the day, we call another pipeline, and it pushes it back to the enrich zone and the sanction zone. And that's basically, this bottom portion over here is called the Data Platform Accelerator, which we've had for a long time. We simply inserted this piece here for the Prophecy MDM, as well as we wrapped the Purview on top. So we're basically combining all three into one product. The Microsoft Purview for the metadata unified management system. Then we have the Prophecy for the data quality and all that. And then we have our way to process this through the life cycle of your Azure. And we have ways to automate this to get you up to speed fast. One of the key things you'll notice quickly within the Microsoft ecosystem is that we have to secure the data. So the storage account needs to talk to Purview and Synapse and the Key Vault. We've already figured all that stuff and have a way to automate that to get it up to speed rather quick. So here we are within the Azure Synapse, and you can see that we have a series of pipelines, and these pipelines are the magic sauce behind there. So essentially reading from those data-driven tables and processing those files and moving it accordingly, and then doing the REST API to push it to the Prophecy and back. So I think it's a good offering, and we're real proud of this one, and this piece should be ready shortly. Another thing I wanted to mention is the Purview is kind of getting its tentacles into a lot of these resources, and one of them happens to be the Synapse. So here you can see we're in the Synapse world, and we're already connected to our Purview by establishing the connection here. And then go back real quick. I can do a search from Purview and say, I'd like to search for the sample insurance CSV. All right, so that's good. So we could see our Purview information here. We could see our classifications and all the same information that we saw back in Purview. So that's a nice feature. Then we can add a linked service or a new integrated data set. Another thing we can do is add a SQL script. So this CSV file is residing on your AWS storage account, just sitting there, and we've mounted it, or we're going to mount it here by selecting the top 100 rows. So it's basically saying, mount this file, and let's go ahead and query it. Give me the top 100 rows. So this is pretty awesome. I mean, this whole data governance hasn't been around forever. For those of us that have been in the field for a long time, something like this is tremendous because we never had anything like this. And then if you throw the DevOps on top of this to deploy the code, it's really amazing how far we've come in the world of data. So I wanted to show that real quick. As far as, so we're about the 7-minute mark remaining. So that's basically what I wanted to talk to you today about. So thank you very much for your time. And are there any questions? I'll send it back to Tyler. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, so it looks like we've got a couple questions coming in, and we'll also give some time for the audience to submit questions into the chat box here. But question for you, Jonathan. Could you briefly describe some of the key roles needed for successful adoption and operation of Prophecy and Purview?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if we simply throw technology at the solution, the chances of success are kind of minor. But what that means is we have to wrap the data governance framework around the technology. So what does that mean? We have people, we have processes, and we have technology. Technology is the Purview, the Prophecy, and the Accelerator. The people is the roles and responsibilities. So what does that mean? Well, typically we would have a data governance board that sits at top, and they are in charge of creating the mission statement and dealing with data-related topics. And then the data stewards are responsible for making sure that the data is tight, clean, accountable, as well as answering questions from the business to the technology. They're kind of the go-between. And then we have the custodians, who are anyone who touches the data along the trail. So in order to have a successful data governance implementation, we highly recommend incorporating a data governance strategy in addition to the technology.
Excellent. One other question here, Jonathan, you might be able to answer. How would you go about implementing a new data solution using Purview, Prophecy, and Synapse together?
Yeah, so we have kind of an accelerator to get you up to speed rather quickly. And what it means is we have like a canned solution for the Purview and the Prophecy, so we could ingest the data and send it through the life cycle so that you could see real-time activity, and that way you would see the benefit and value. because we talked about data as an asset. If your data is not clean, if it's not consistent, if you have silos, if you have multiple people reporting on different data sets, you show up to a meeting and everybody has a different figure for their report, that's not good. So by implementing this three-tiered approach, you can ensure that your quality is there, which means you can treat your data as an asset and increase sales, lower costs, streamline processes, and basically make sure that your data is used to manage the business. So thank you.
Great. A couple other questions just coming in. So there will be a recording as well as the content that we presented today. We will share that with all the attendees today. For those asking for contact or even next steps on Purview and Prophecy, we'll send out some contact information there. But again, feel free to reach out directly to me as well. I'll put in my email into the chat. So happy to field any additional questions or set up with the team today here. Last chance for any additional questions.
Hey Tyler, I wanted to add a little bit to that question around how would we go about implementing these solutions. So first, I will deploy Purview, and Purview will allow me to get a handle on the metadata and really define what is transactional data, what is reference and master data, what is really big data. Once you get a handle on that and you have thorough understanding of your data state, then the next logical step is to implement a master data management system using Prophecy because of the tight integration. At that point, you have your core data assets well defined in one place, one version of the truth that you can share with the rest of your organization. Then you can use the various components of Synapse Analytics, because Synapse Analytics is a unified data platform that offers machine learning, ETL. It offers like a storage account to grab that transactional data, to grab that big data, and in combination with your master data, really deliver powerful insights. So that's how we will go about implementing these solutions together.
Perfect. Thank you, Pedro. I think that about wraps up all the questions that we've had today from the audience. So want to thank all of our speakers again today for the great content and time today. Thank you all for attending the session. Once again, we'll be sharing out all of the content here as well as the recording. So thank you again for your time today.